Hi guys! Recently, my family and I went on a little weekend trip to a new to us state park. We did something we've never done before and we stayed in a yurt. Seriously, how cool is that? It was great and of course nicer than our usual camping in a tent since it had actual beds. It also had a skylight which was really cool. The yurt was right by a lake and had a canoe that came with the reservation. So we got to play on the lake a bunch. It was not a great lake for swimming, but we had a good time canoeing around and fishing and checking out the park as we had not been there before. Naturally, I brought along some clay and a few tools, and I did a little project while we were there. I debated ahead of time about what I'd actually make there, and I thought that a small nature impression plates would be good, as they're small and I can use plants around the yurt for impressions. When we got there, I realized there were a bunch of pine cones, so I ended up using those. I went for a little walk and picked up some good ones. For this project, I used burlap, a wire tool, some water and a sponge, a wide rib, a cutting tool, a rolling pin, a piece of cement board, though a piece of wood would work just as well, and I also needed clay, of course. Here I'm using Georgie's G-Mix, which is a stoneware clay. And then I had my pine cones that I collected on my walk. To start with, I took a chunk of clay and rolled it out. I like this rolling pin as it has guides on the end so I can make it very consistent. Then I cut out some square and rectangular pieces. I wasn't concerned with getting them the same size because I like variety. Then I used the pine cones as a stamp to make impressions in the clay. And I quickly realized that I did not like how a lot of the pine cone impressions looked in the clay. It didn't look like a pine cone at all, just like weird splotches. A couple of the pine cones worked really well, specifically the ones with the cone scales that were tight to the pine cone. The looser looking cones didn't work well. So I went for another little walk and sought out the better, tighter pine cones and started over. I've realized with pottery, and probably a lot of things in life, that it either works great or you learn something. The first attempt at pine cone impressions? Well, I learned something. Back now with better pine cones, I started over. I rolled out a new slab, smoothed it, and then transferred it to the burlap. I like to do this because it adds a nice texture to the back and makes it more interesting. Then I smoothed the front and started cutting out squares again. Once I had them all cut, I started using the best pine cones for impressions. I put a variety of shapes and sizes of pine cone impressions on each plate, so they look more interesting. Once all the impressions were done, I started smoothing out the edges of the plates and making raised edges all around the plate. That way it's a little plate or trinket dish and not just a flat slab. I enjoyed some nice morning hot chocolate while I did this project. My husband made us all hot chocolate and then he made breakfast, so I had some time to work on this. He's a keeper. After making some square plates, I decided I wanted to do some round ones too. That would have been easier had I decided that when I was still home, so that way I could have brought my big round cookie cutters, but this was a last minute choice, and so I made do. I rolled out another slab, but this time I used a plastic container as a template to cut around, and I made some round dishes using the same exact methods as before. Which plate shape do you like better? Let me know in the comments. I think I prefer the round ones, but I do like both. I'd also love to know what fun trips you've done this summer. We had 2 fun camping trips, both of which I recorded on YouTube. We had a tent camping trip and then this one in the yurt. And then we've got another trip coming up pretty soon here, a longer, more fancy one that does not involve a tent or yurts or even being outside constantly. So I'm pretty excited for that one. I do love being out in nature, but I'm looking forward to doing a little less prep work for sure. I just glazed these with 2 different homemade green glazes, and they'll be in my next kiln unloading video all finished. Speaking of kiln loading videos, check out my latest one here, and thanks for watching.